One peaceful afternoon in the park, a black mother was enjoying a quiet moment with her 9-year-old son. The joy vanished when two police officers approached, suspecting her bag of protein powder to be drugs. Handcuffed in front of the crowd, she broke down in despair under her son's bewildered gaze, but the whole scene was live-streamed, sparking public outrage. What no one knew was that her husband was a military officer, and just half an hour later the two officers were fired. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow across Central Park, painting the world in warm hues that seemed to make everything softer, kinder. Children's laughter echoed from the playground, a symphony of pure joy that mixed with the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds settling in for the evening. The smell of fresh-cut grass lingered in the air, mingling with the sweet scent of blooming flowers that bordered the walking paths. Monica Williams sat on a weathered wooden bench, her scrub slightly wrinkled from a 12-hour shift at the hospital. At 42, she carried herself with the quiet strength that came from years of caring for others while raising a child alone. Her dark eyes, though tired, sparkled with warmth as she watched her 9-year-old son Jaden race toward the monkey bars with unbridled enthusiasm. "Mama, watch me," Jaden called out, his gap-toothed grin infectious. His small hands gripped the metal bars as he swung from one to the next, his legs kicking with determination. Despite his size, there was something fierce about him, something that reminded Monica of herself at that age, stubborn, curious, and full of dreams that seemed too big for his small body. "I'm watching, baby," Monica called back, her voice carrying the kind of love that could heal wounds and chase away nightmares. She reached into her canvas tote bag and pulled out a thermos filled with chocolate milk and a small container of protein powder. Jaden was growing fast, and the pediatrician had recommended the supplement to help with his development. She smiled as she measured out the powder, thinking about how much her little boy had grown this past year. This was their ritual, their sacred time together after another long week. Monica worked double shifts whenever she could, knowing that every extra dollar meant a better future for Jaden. With his father deployed overseas for the third time in 2 years, these quiet moments in the park had become precious beyond measure. "Look, Mama, I made it all the way across." Jaden dropped from the last bar and ran toward her, his sneakers pounding against the soft earth. His face was flushed with pride and exertion, and Monica felt her heart swell with that particular joy that only a parent knows, the pure overwhelming love that makes everything else fade into the background. "That's my strong boy," she said, opening her arms as he crashed into her embrace. He smelled like sunshine and adventure, with just a hint of the apple juice she'd packed in his lunch that morning. "You ready for your chocolate milk?" "Yes, ma'am." Jaden bounced on his toes as Monica mixed the protein powder into the thermos, the white powder swirling into the chocolate milk until it disappeared completely. She handed him the thermos, and he took long, grateful gulps. Around them, the park was alive with the gentle rhythm of a peaceful Saturday. An elderly couple walked hand in hand down the path, their quiet conversation punctuated by comfortable silences. A group of teenagers played frisbee on the grass, their shouts of mock competition adding to the park's natural soundtrack. Dog walkers paused to let their pets sniff at interesting spots, while joggers maintained their steady pace along the designated trails. Monica pulled out her phone and snapped a quick photo of Jaden, chocolate milk mustache and all. She'd send it to her husband Marcus later, knowing that even though he was thousands of miles away, these little glimpses of home meant everything to him. The Wi-Fi at his base wasn't always reliable, but she tried to send him something every day, proof that their little family was thriving in his absence. "Can we stay a little longer, Mama?" Jaden asked, his eyes already drifting back toward the playground. "Please, just a little while longer," Monica agreed, settling back against the bench. She deserved this peace, this simple pleasure of watching her son play. The hospital would still be there tomorrow, with its constant demands and endless crises. But this moment, this perfect ordinary moment, belonged to them. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, Monica felt a deep sense of contentment wash over her. These were the moments that made all the struggle worthwhile. These were the memories she was building for Jaden, the foundation of love and stability that would carry him through whatever challenges life might bring. She had no way of knowing that in just a few minutes, their peaceful afternoon would shatter into something unrecognizable, something that would test every ounce of strength she'd built up over the years. For now, there was only the golden light, the sound of her son's laughter, and the quiet certainty that love could conquer anything. The first sign of trouble came in the form of heavy footsteps on the gravel path. Monica looked up from her phone, where she'd been typing a quick message to Marcus, to see two police officers approaching their bench. Something in their posture, rigid, purposeful, suspicious, made her stomach clench with an instinctive unease. Officer Bradley, a thick-set man with cold eyes and a permanent scowl, stopped directly in front of their bench. His partner, Officer Martinez, flanked him on the right, hand resting casually on his belt. They both wore the kind of expression that Monica had learned to recognize during her years working in the emergency room, the look of people who had already made up their minds about a situation before they had all the facts. "Afternoon, ma'am," Officer Bradley said, his tone anything but friendly. His gaze had already moved past Monica's face to focus on her canvas bag, where the small container of protein powder sat innocuously beside her water bottle and Jaden's extra snacks. "Good afternoon, officers," Monica replied carefully, pulling Jaden closer to her side. At 9 years old, he was already learning to read the tension that seemed to follow his mother whenever they encountered law enforcement. It was a conversation they'd had to have too early, a reality she wished she could shield him from. "We've had some reports of suspicious activity in the park," Officer Bradley continued, still staring at her bag. "Mind if we take a look at what you've got there?" Monica's heart began to race, but she kept her voice steady. "Of course, officers, it's just snacks for my son, and some protein powder for his milk." She reached for the container, but Officer Bradley held up a hand. "Ma'am, I need you to keep your hands where I can see them," he said sharply, and suddenly the peaceful park atmosphere shattered completely. Several families nearby turned to look, their conversations dying as they sensed the shift in energy. "Mama," Jaden whispered, his small hand gripping her scrubs, "what's happening?" "It's okay, baby," Monica said softly, though her pulse was hammering against her throat. "These officers just need to check our things." Officer Martinez stepped forward and picked up the protein powder container, examining the white powder through the clear plastic. "This looks suspicious," he announced loudly, loud enough for the growing crowd of onlookers to hear clearly. "Sir, that's protein powder for children," Monica said, her nurse's training keeping her voice calm despite the panic rising in her chest. "You can read the label, it's chocolate-flavored for growing kids." "That's what they all say," Officer Bradley replied dismissively. His voice carried across the park, and Monica could feel dozens of eyes turning toward them. Phone cameras began to appear, people holding up their devices with the morbid curiosity that seemed to grip crowds whenever they sensed drama unfolding. "Ma'am, you're under suspicion of possession of a controlled substance," Officer Martinez announced, pulling out his handcuffs. The metal caught the late afternoon sunlight, sending sharp flashes across Monica's vision. "What?" "No," the words burst out of Monica with more force than she intended. "Officers, please, you can test it right now, call your supervisor. This is clearly a misunderstanding." But they weren't listening. Officer Bradley had already moved behind her, roughly grabbing her wrists and pulling them behind her back. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into her skin as he secured them with unnecessary force. "Mama. Mama. No." Jaden's voice cracked as he threw his small arms around Monica's waist, trying to shield her from the officers. Tears streamed down his face as he looked up at the men towering over them. "That's my milk powder. It's chocolate. It's not drugs." The sight of her 9-year-old son trying to protect her while she sat powerless in handcuffs broke something fundamental inside Monica's chest. She had spent his entire life trying to keep him safe, to show him a world where justice existed and good people were protected. Now, in one terrible moment, that illusion was crumbling around them. "Son, you need to step back," Officer Martinez said, not unkindly, but with the firm authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Please don't take my mama," Jaden sobbed, his voice carrying across the park with heartbreaking clarity. "She didn't do anything wrong. She takes care of sick people. She helps people." By now, a substantial crowd had gathered, forming a loose circle around the unfolding scene. Monica could hear the murmur of voices, some expressing confusion, others outrage. Camera phones were everywhere, recording every moment of her humiliation. "This is racial profiling," someone called out from the crowd. "Let her go. Anyone can see that's not drugs," another voice added, but the officers seemed immune to the growing protests from the bystanders. They had committed to their course of action, and nothing, not Jaden's tears, not the crowd's objections, not Monica's calm attempts at reasoning, was going to deter them. "You have the right to remain silent," Officer Bradley began, his voice carrying the mechanical quality of words recited countless times before. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the Miranda rights continued, Monica felt a surreal detachment settle over her. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not in front of her son, not over a container of chocolate protein powder that she'd bought at the grocery store 3 days ago. She closed her eyes and tried to find that place of calm strength that had carried her through night shifts and medical crises, through Marcus's deployments and Jaden's midnight fevers. "Mama, look at me," Jaden whispered, his small hands reaching up to touch her face. "I love you, Mama. It's going to be okay." And in that moment, hearing her 9-year-old son trying to comfort her while she sat in handcuffs, Monica felt her heart break and strengthen simultaneously. Whatever happened next, she would get through this. She would find a way to protect her son and clear her name. She had to. The crowd continued to grow, and with it, the number of cameras capturing every moment of their nightmare. Within minutes of the initial arrest, the scene in the park had transformed into something Monica had never imagined she'd find herself at the center of. What began as a peaceful Saturday afternoon had erupted into a social media firestorm that was spreading across the internet at lightning speed. "Oh my God, are you getting this?" Monica heard someone whisper urgently into their phone. "This is insane. A black mother being arrested for protein powder while her kid is crying." The crowd had swelled to at least 50 people, many of whom had been drawn by the commotion but stayed because of what they were witnessing. Parents who had been pushing children on swings now stood with their phones raised, their faces reflecting a mixture of outrage and disbelief. Teenagers who had been playing basketball abandoned their game to join the growing circle of observers. "Everyone needs to back up," Officer Bradley barked, but his authority seemed diminished by the sheer number of people pressing closer. "This is police business. This is our business," called out Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who regularly brought her grandchildren to this same park. "We have a right to see what's happening in our community." Monica could hear the distinctive chimes and notification sounds of multiple phones as videos were uploaded in real time. She caught fragments of what people were saying as they filmed, live on Instagram right now. "You guys have to see this, #Justice for Monica." One young woman, barely out of college by the look of her, was providing live commentary as she streamed, "I'm here in Central Park where a black mother and nurse is being arrested for having protein powder in her bag. Her 9-year-old son is begging them to stop. This is exactly the kind of systemic racism we've been talking about." The comments on her live stream were pouring in faster than she could read them. "This is disgusting. Where is this happening? Someone call the news. That poor baby. A cab. This is America in 2024. As Officer Martinez attempted to guide Monica toward their patrol car, Jaden refused to let go of her leg. His sobs had quieted into a steady stream of tears, but his grip on her was fierce and unwavering. "Sir, the child needs to come with us," Officer Bradley said, reaching for Jaden. "Don't you touch my son." Monica's voice rang out with such force that even the officers paused. It was the first time she had raised her voice, and the sound cut through the crowd noise like a blade. "He hasn't done anything wrong. None of us have done anything wrong. Ma'am, you need to calm down," Officer Martinez replied, but his tone had shifted slightly. Monica could see him glancing nervously at the crowd, at all the cameras trained on them. "I am calm," Monica said, her voice dropping back to its normal register but carrying an edge of steel. "I'm a registered nurse. I work at Metropolitan Hospital. I have never been arrested, never been in trouble with the law. That container holds chocolate protein powder that I bought for my son at the grocery store on Wednesday. If you test it, you will find that it contains nothing but protein powder, vitamins, and chocolate flavoring." Her words carried clearly across the park, and Monica could see people in the crowd nodding, their expressions growing more supportive. She was describing a reality they recognized, a working mother, a healthcare worker, someone trying to take care of her child. "Test it right now," someone called out from the crowd. "Yeah, test it," another voice joined in. "Do your job properly." The chant began organically, growing from a few voices into a unified demand. "Test it now, test it now." Officer Bradley's face had grown red with frustration and embarrassment. What should have been a simple arrest was turning into a public relations nightmare, broadcast live to hundreds of viewers and growing by the minute. Monica noticed a familiar face in the crowd, Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, one of the attending physicians from her hospital. Dr. Rodriguez was filming with her phone, but she also stepped forward. "Officers, I'm Dr. Rodriguez from Metropolitan Hospital," she called out clearly. "Monica Williams is one of our most respected nurses. She's been caring for patients for over 15 years. This is clearly a misunderstanding that could be resolved in minutes with a simple field test." More voices joined in, people stepping forward to vouch for Monica or simply to demand that common sense prevail. But the officers seemed trapped by their initial decision, unable or unwilling to admit that they might have made a mistake. As they reached the patrol car, Officer Martinez opened the back door. The sight of that open car door, the physical manifestation of where this was heading, sent a fresh wave of panic through Jaden. "No, no, you can't take her," he screamed, his young voice cracking with anguish. "Mama, Mama." The raw emotion in his voice seemed to affect even some of the officers. Monica could see Officer Martinez hesitate, his hand on the car door as Jaden's cries echoed across the park. By now, several news outlets had picked up the story from the social media streams. Monica could see people in the crowd checking their phones and announcing Channel 7 is reporting this. It's on Twitter trending. The police department's phone is probably ringing off the hook right now. As they attempted to get Monica into the car, one of the live streamers approached Officer Bradley directly. "Officer, what's your name and badge number?" she asked, her phone camera focused squarely on him. "The people have a right to know who is responsible for this." "Back up," Officer Bradley growled, but Monica could see the uncertainty creeping into his expression. This wasn't going according to any script he knew. The crowd pressed closer, their voices growing louder, more unified in their demand for justice. And somewhere in the growing chaos, Monica held on to one thought: the truth had a way of emerging, especially when this many people were watching. At the downtown precinct, the atmosphere was starkly different from the warm afternoon sunlight they'd left behind in the park. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in an unforgiving glare that seemed designed to make people feel small and defeated. The walls were painted an institutional beige that had probably been depressing when it was first applied decades ago. Monica sat in a plastic chair in the processing room, still in handcuffs, while Jaden huddled close beside her on another chair that was clearly not meant for children. He had stopped crying but remained pressed against her side, his small body trembling occasionally with leftover sobs. Every few minutes he would whisper, "When can we go home, Mama?" And Monica's heart would break a little more. "Soon, baby," she whispered back, though she had no idea if that was true. "This is all a big mistake, and mistakes get fixed." Detective Morrison, a weathered man in his 50s who had seen too much of everything, sat across from them with the container of protein powder and a stack of paperwork. He had been more professional than the arresting officers, but Monica could see that he was still treating this as a legitimate drug case rather than the obvious error it was. "Mrs. Williams, if you just cooperate with us, this will go much smoother," he said, sliding a document across the scarred metal table. "If you sign this statement acknowledging possession, we can probably work out a deal that keeps you from doing any real time." "I'm not signing anything," Monica said firmly, "because I haven't done anything wrong. That is protein powder for children, and any test will prove it." "Ma'am, that's what they all say. Street drugs come in all kinds of disguises these days." Before Monica could respond, the sound of heavy doors slamming open echoed through the building. Rapid footsteps were approaching down the hallway, and Monica could hear a familiar voice, raised in anger and authority. "Where is my wife? Where is Monica Williams?" Jaden's head snapped up so fast Monica was afraid he'd hurt his neck. "Daddy?" The door to the processing room burst open, and Major Marcus Williams, United States Army, strode in wearing his dress uniform, his ribbons and insignia catching the fluorescent light. He was an imposing man under normal circumstances, but now, with fury radiating from every line of his body, he seemed to fill the entire room. "Daddy!" Jaden launched himself from his chair and ran to his father, who swept him up in arms that shook with barely controlled rage. "It's okay, son. Daddy's here now," Marcus said, his voice gentle with Jaden but his eyes never leaving Detective Morrison. "Are you hurt? Is Mama hurt?" "They put handcuffs on Mama for her milk powder," Jaden said, his words tumbling over each other. "I told them it was chocolate milk powder, but they wouldn't listen. Everyone was filming and Mama was crying and Chad, baby boy. It's okay now." Marcus set Jaden down gently but kept one protective hand on his son's shoulder as he turned his full attention to the detective. When he spoke, his voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I am Major Marcus Williams, and this is my wife and son. I want to know exactly why my family is being held here." Detective Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Dealing with angry spouses was one thing, but dealing with an angry military officer was another matter entirely. "Major Williams, your wife was arrested on suspicion of drug possession. We found her with a container of white powder that is protein powder," Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through the detective's explanation like a blade. "Chocolate-flavored protein powder for children, which you would know if you had bothered to test it instead of making assumptions." "Sir, we have procedures. Have you tested the substance?" Marcus demanded. Detective Morrison hesitated. "We're waiting for the lab results." "When was the test ordered?" Another pause. The initial field test was inconclusive." "The initial field test wasn't performed, was it?" Marcus stepped closer to the table, his presence somehow making the institutional room feel even smaller. "You arrested my wife, traumatized my 9-year-old son, and paraded them through a public park without even bothering to verify what substance she was carrying." Behind them, Monica could hear more commotion in the hallway. Voices were raised, phones were ringing, and she could make out fragments of conversation. "Media circus outside. Department spokesman. Social media nightmare. Major Williams," Detective Morrison began, but Marcus cut him off. "I've been watching the live streams for the past 2 hours, Marcus said, pulling out his phone. "From a military base 300 miles away, I watched my wife get handcuffed in a public park while my son begged you to stop. I watched grown men with guns treat my family like criminals because you couldn't be bothered to look at a product label." At that moment, a younger officer Monica hadn't seen before knocked on the doorframe. "Detective Morrison, the test results are back." The room went deadly quiet. Detective Morrison looked up with the expression of a man who already knew what he was about to hear but was hoping against hope that he was wrong. "And?" The young officer glanced nervously at Marcus, then at Monica, then back at the detective. "It's protein powder, sir. Chocolate-flavored protein powder, exactly what she said it was." The silence that followed was so complete that Monica could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, could hear Jaden's quiet breathing, could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. Detective Morrison stared down at the paperwork in front of him, and Monica could see his face cycling through embarrassment, frustration, and something that might have been shame. When he looked up, he seemed to have aged several years in the span of those few seconds. "Mrs. Williams," he began, but his voice was different now. The authority was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like defeat. "The charges will be dropped, of course. This appears to have been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding." Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet now, which was somehow more intimidating than when he had been shouting. "My wife is one of the most respected nurses at Metropolitan Hospital. She has never been arrested, never been in trouble with the law. She was sitting in a public park with our son, and your officers arrested her for possession of a substance they never bothered to test." He moved around the table and gently helped Monica to her feet, supporting her as Detective Morrison fumbled with the keys to remove her handcuffs. The metal restraints fell away from her wrists, leaving red marks that would remind her of this day for weeks to come. "Mama," Jaden whispered, reaching up to touch the marks on her wrists. "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore, baby," Monica said softly, pulling him close. "Not anymore." But Marcus wasn't finished. He stood tall, every inch the military officer, and when he spoke, his words carried the weight of someone who had sworn an oath to protect and defend the Constitution. "This doesn't end here," he said simply. "This was not a mistake. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a failure of basic human decency, and there will be consequences. Outside the police precinct, the scene was unlike anything Monica had ever witnessed. What had started as a small crowd of curious parkgoers had evolved into something that felt like a movement. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the darkening sky. Reporters with microphones and camera crews were interviewing anyone willing to talk, while protesters held signs reading "Justice for Monica" and "Test before you arrest." The family emerged from the building together, Marcus's arm around Monica's shoulders, Jaden's small hand clasped tightly in hers. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause that rolled across the street like thunder. "There she is," someone called out. "Monica, Monica." The chant began organically and spread through the crowd. "Justice for Monica, justice for Monica." Reporters surged forward, microphones thrust toward them, cameras flashing in the gathering dusk. Monica instinctively stepped back, overwhelmed by the attention, but Marcus moved slightly forward, shielding his family while making it clear he was prepared to speak. Major Williams, reporters called out. "Can you tell us what happened in there?" Marcus looked out over the crowd, his jaw set with determination. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the street, practiced from years of addressing troops and speaking at military ceremonies. "My name is Major Marcus Williams, United States Army," he began. "This afternoon, my wife Monica, a registered nurse who has dedicated her career to caring for others, was arrested in front of our 9-year-old son for the crime of carrying protein powder in a public park." The crowd had grown silent, hanging on his every word. She was handcuffed, humiliated, and treated like a criminal because 2 police officers made assumptions instead of doing their job. They never tested the substance, they never listened to her explanation. They arrested first and asked questions later. "What was the substance?" called out a reporter from Channel 7. Marcus held up the container of protein powder that had been returned to them. "Chocolate-flavored protein powder for children. Available at any grocery store. Completely legal, completely innocent, exactly what my wife told them it was from the very beginning." The crowd's reaction was immediate and visceral, shouts of outrage mixed with calls for accountability. Monica could see people in the crowd pulling out their phones again, sharing this moment across social media platforms in real time. "This is not just about one family," Marcus continued, his voice rising with passion. "This is about a system that allows officers to make split-second judgments based on prejudice rather than evidence. This is about accountability, about treating all citizens with the dignity and respect they deserve regardless of their race." Dr. Rodriguez had made her way to the front of the crowd. When Marcus paused, she stepped forward and took the microphone that one of the reporters offered her. "I'm Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, and I work with Monica at Metropolitan Hospital," she said. "Monica Williams is one of the finest nurses I've ever worked with. She's saved lives, comforted families in their darkest hours, and worked through this entire pandemic putting others' needs before her own. The idea that she would be carrying drugs in a public park while with her son is not just wrong, it's absurd." Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman from the park, had also made her way to the front of the crowd. Despite her age, her voice rang out clearly. "I was there, I saw everything. Those officers made up their minds the moment they saw her. They didn't care about evidence. They didn't care about that little boy crying for his mama. They just saw what they wanted to see." Jaden, who had been quietly holding on to Monica's hand, suddenly stepped forward. At 9 years old, he barely reached the microphones, but when he spoke, every person in that crowd leaned in to listen. "My mama takes care of sick people," he said, his young voice carrying clearly in the evening air. "She helps them get better. She makes me protein shakes because I'm growing and she wants me to be strong. She didn't do anything wrong. She was just being my mama." The crowd's response to Jaden's words was overwhelming. Many people were visibly emotional, and Monica could see tears in the eyes of parents who understood exactly what this family had been through. "What happens now?" asked a reporter from the local NBC affiliate. Marcus's expression hardened with resolve. "Now we demand accountability. The officers involved in this incident showed a complete failure of judgment and professionalism. The department needs to investigate not just what happened, but why it happened. What training failures led to this moment? What systemic issues allowed two grown men to arrest a mother in front of her child, without even bothering to verify their suspicions? Are you considering legal action? Another reporter asked. We're considering every option available to us, Marcus replied, but this isn't just about us. This is about making sure this never happens to another family. This is about creating a system where evidence matters more than assumptions, where citizens are treated with dignity regardless of their race. Monica finally stepped forward to the microphones, her voice steady despite the emotion of the day. I want to thank everyone who stood up for us today, she said. The people in the park who filmed what happened, who spoke out, who demanded better. The people here tonight who believe that justice matters. My son saw something ugly today, but he also saw that good people will stand up when they see something wrong. What do you want people to know? Asked a reporter. Monica looked out over the crowd, at all the faces looking back at her with support and determination. I want people to know that this could happen to anyone. I was doing exactly what thousands of parents do every day, spending time with my child in a public park. The only thing that made me different was the color of my skin and the assumptions that came with it. She paused, gathering her strength for what she wanted to say next, but I also want people to know that the truth has power. When people stand up and demand better, when they refuse to look away from injustice, change can happen. My son learned something important today, that his voice matters, that people will listen, and that standing up for what's right is always worth it. The crowd erupted in applause that seemed to echo off the buildings surrounding them. News crews rushed to interview people in the crowd, capturing the groundswell of support and calls for reform. Social media hashtags were trending nationally, #Justice for Monica, #Test before arrest, #Accountability matters. As the family finally made their way through the crowd toward Marcus's car, people reached out to touch Monica's hand, to offer words of support, to tell Jaden how brave he had been. The young woman who had live-streamed the original incident caught up with them. Mrs. Williams, she called out, the video has been viewed over 2 million times. People all over the country are talking about this. Monica squeezed her hand. Thank you for not looking away. Thank you for making sure people saw the truth. As they drove away from the precinct, Jaden fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted by the emotional roller coaster of the day. Monica watched the crowd in the rearview mirror, still gathered under the streetlights, still demanding accountability, still believing that change was possible. It's not over, is it? She asked Marcus quietly. No, he replied, reaching over to take her hand. But for the first time today, I think that's a good thing. Within hours, the police department announced a full investigation into the incident. The officers involved were placed on administrative leave pending review. Civil rights organizations had reached out offering support. And across the country, people were having conversations about prejudice, about accountability, and about the kind of world they wanted to build for children like Jaden. Monica Williams had started the day as a nurse looking forward to a quiet afternoon with her son. She was ending it as a symbol of dignity in the face of injustice, proof that one person's courage to stand up for the truth could inspire thousands of others to demand better. As they pulled into their driveway, Jaden stirred awake and looked around sleepily. Are we home, Mama? Yes, baby, Monica said softly. We're home. And for the first time all day those words felt completely perfectly true.